Welcome to Zenith History. In today's video, we're traveling back to 1066, a year that marked the end of an era. It was the year of the Battle of Stamford Bridge, a pivotal clash that not only shaped the future of England, but also signaled the end of the Viking Age. The Battle of Stamford Bridge is often overshadowed by the Battle of Hastings, which happened shortly after, but in many ways, Stamford Bridge was just as significant. This is the story of Viking ambition, English resistance, and the final battle that would bring an age of Norse warriors to a dramatic close. The year 1066 was a turbulent one for England. King Edward the Confessor had died without an heir, and a fierce struggle for the throne ensued. Three main contenders emerged: Harold Godwinson, the powerful English noble who was crowned king; William, Duke of Normandy, who claimed Edward had promised him the throne; and Harald Hardrada, the King of Norway, who sought to revive the old Viking claim to England. While William prepared his forces in Normandy, it was Hardrada who struck first. Harald Hardrada was one of the most formidable Viking leaders of his time, known for his military prowess and ambition. For him, the invasion of England was not just a claim to the throne, it was a chance to restore Viking dominance in the British Isles. Hardrada sailed from Norway with a fleet of over 300 ships, carrying thousands of battle-hardened warriors. He was joined by Tostig Godwinson, the exiled brother of King Harold Godwinson, who had his own reasons for wanting to see Harold dethroned. Together, they launched an invasion that would take the north of England by surprise. On September 20th, 1066, the combined forces of Hardrada and Tostig defeated an English army at the Battle of Fulford, just outside the city of York. It was a devastating loss for the English, and it seemed as though the north would soon fall into Viking hands. Harald Hardrada, confident after his victory, planned to consolidate his hold over the region. He didn't expect what came next. Just 5 days later, on September 25th, 1066, King Harold Godwinson arrived with his army. In an extraordinary feat of military endurance, Harold had marched his forces nearly 200 miles from the south of England to the north in just 4 days. The speed of his response caught the Viking invaders completely off guard. Hardrada's men were resting at Stamford Bridge, unaware that an English army was fast approaching. They had left their armor and much of their weaponry back at their ships, not expecting a battle so soon. The scene was set for one of the most significant battles in English history. The battle began with a dramatic standoff across the River Derwent. The Vikings were on one side and Harold's English forces on the other. According to legend, a lone Viking berserker held the narrow bridge for some time, cutting down any English soldier who tried to cross. Eventually, he was brought down, but his bravery became one of the most famous stories from the battle. Once the English crossed the bridge, the real fighting began. Harald Hardrada, realizing the gravity of the situation, rallied his men. Despite being unarmored and caught off guard, the Vikings fought fiercely. Hardrada himself was a towering figure on the battlefield, leading his troops from the front, wielding his massive two-handed axe. But as the battle raged, Hardrada was struck in the throat by an arrow, killing him instantly. His death sent shockwaves through the Viking ranks. The invincible Harald Hardrada, the last great Viking king, had fallen. Tostig Godwinson took command after Hardrada's death, but the tide of the battle had already turned in favor of the English. The Vikings, exhausted and disorganized, were gradually overwhelmed by Harold's forces. By the end of the day, the Viking army was decimated. Of the more than 300 ships that had brought the invasion force, only around 24 were needed to carry the survivors back to Norway. The Battle of Stamford Bridge was a decisive victory for Harold Godwinson and marked the end of the Viking threat to England. It was also the last time a Viking army would invade the British Isles. For centuries, the Vikings had raided, settled, and ruled over parts of England. They had carved out kingdoms such as Danelaw, and their influence on English culture, law, and language was profound. But after Stamford Bridge, the Viking Age came to a dramatic close. Harald Hardrada's death symbolized the end of Viking ambition and the final chapter of their influence in England. However, the victory at Stamford Bridge came at a great cost. Harold's army had been weakened by the long march north and the fierce battle with the Vikings. Just 3 weeks later, Harold would face another invader, William, Duke of Normandy, at the Battle of Hastings. Exhausted and with fewer troops at his command, Harold would ultimately lose the battle and his life at Hastings, leading to the Norman conquest of England. So, in many ways, the Battle of Stamford Bridge is a story of triumph and tragedy. It was a decisive victory over the last great Viking invasion, but it also weakened the English forces and paved the way for the Norman conquest. Had Harold not been forced to fight Hardrada in the north, the outcome at Hastings might have been very different. But beyond its impact on English history, the Battle of Stamford Bridge represents the end of an era. The Viking Age, which had begun with raids on Lindisfarne in 793, came to a close with the death of Harald Hardrada. The fierce seafaring warriors who had once terrorized Europe were now part of history. The world was changing, and with the rise of centralized kingdoms and new powers like the Normans, the age of the Vikings was over. So what do you think of the Battle of Stamford Bridge? Was it truly the end of the Viking Age? Or do you think the legacy of the Vikings lived on in other ways? Let us know in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this dive into the history of one of England's most pivotal battles, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Zenith History for more epic tales from history. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.